happy Friday. I'm so glad to see all of you here. So we'll be doing two things today, and it's going to be Lola's daily actions and revision control. The kind of format that it works, we'll be talking. You guys are welcome to mute and unmute and chime in if you have questions. And then we also have the chat open. You can see the chat on the bottom part of the screen, little chat bubble. You can pop that out and then see questions as they're being asked, ask questions of your own, and then we'll monitor that and get to those as we go through the day. And then I'll chat resources and links in there and stuff. Okay. And also y'all are welcome if it's your first time in Bildr Hour to do like a little intro where you can just tell us your name, where you're from, what you're working on. Doesn't have to be Bildr related, just so we can get to know you a little bit better. So that's there if you feel called to it. Okay, let's kick off. Lola, we would love to, hi, welcome. And Mark, I don't know if we have to do something special to allow Lola to show her screen.
I don't believe so. I think the permission should allow it. Let me double check.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Share my screen.
Good.
You can? Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Okay, Lola. So we would love to hear a little bit more about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then if you could take us through your daily.co actions, and I will chat a link to that here. And yeah, just take us through your process of building this.
Yeah, definitely. Super happy to do all of those things. I'm Lola. Love to just build all sorts of things with no code. Very happy that I got introduced to the Bildr system, but today I really wanted to talk through like the daily actions in Bildr. I was thinking for our next few minutes together, we can start with a demo app that I made that uses those daily actions, just so you guys can get some information about potential use cases and see it in action. Then we can dive more deeply into like the Bildr Studio, show how that was made, talk about the actions, all of that good stuff, and some other things that you can do with daily outside of the demo app that I have today. So
I love it.
Awesome. So I guess, but first, definitely wanted to start with introducing daily, because we do have quite a few people from daily today. So if for folks who are unfamiliar, daily provides real-time audio and video APIs to help all kinds of developers build audio and video into their apps really quickly. It's all based on WebRTC. So if you don't know what that is, when you add video and audio, it looks like the URL's in there. When you add video and audio with daily to your applications, your users won't need to download any extra software in order to be able to share their browsers, share their screens, share their video with the apps that you built. And
nice.
Yeah, so pretty neat. Have used it on a couple of different no-code platforms. So excited to bring it to Bildr. So with all of that said, we can dive into some of the demos here, and anybody feel free to unmute, share extra contacts, share pictures, share anything, share comments. So let me just put my thing up over here. So yeah, first we can start with like a demo application just to showcase kind of some of the things that you can do with daily. So for the purposes of this Bildr Hour, I think last year, sort of virtual co-working, virtual study groups were really popular. I, as a mostly remote person, definitely appreciated getting to hop into video rooms and work with others. And so this demo application is something that enables you to do just that. You can share it with people, create virtual focus rooms to kind of pop into and work alongside others. So quick demo, won't spend too much time of just how it works. Then we can kind of dive into Bildr.
It's such a good idea. I love the idea. Like there was that social element that was definitely missing without something like this. And that like brought something like this brings so much to what we can do with tech during during like this year and the last.
And yeah, with Bildr daily, it doesn't take long to make that happen. So yeah, we could just do like a quick little demo. You just have to put in the time that you want your focus room to end, which will make it so that the video rooms that we jump into won't be accessible after that time. You can do something like really late. Click create your focus room. You get a link. You can copy your link and jump into a daily room. So also wanted to spend a little bit of time. So this is going to get really meta because I'm in a video room like in Bildr. But the daily integration uses daily pre-built. So all of this like UX kind of comes with it. And when you go into meetings, you have a few things as well. So views like grid views, if you have more than just me in this room, chat, see who's participating, things like screen sharing. And you can do all of those now within your Bildr application. You don't have to do any extra setup. It kind of overlays for whatever page that you want it to appear on, overlays a video chat into your application. So high level overview of one example of something that you can do with the daily actions for Bildr. And I can pause there for like questions or comments before going into how all of this happened and how it kind of works.
Lola, that looks fantastic and it looks super easy. Yeah, so it looks like Ashley has a comment. Yep. She said they really want to make it as easy and fast as possible for people to get going with video chatting in the browser. And that looked super easy. And I can think of so many cases like where people could use that in their apps to connect with their community, to be able to like do some admin troubleshooting with people. Like, I mean, there's just so much potential there. That is so cool.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point on like use cases, but absolutely, like some people use like you can do things like telehealth, virtual co-working, any sort of like meeting or networking application, creator applications. We'll talk through some other features that are part of the daily integration that aren't necessarily a part of like this demo here, but kind of to get started with using the actions. In my application.
Zoom around.
Oh, sorry. Did someone say something? I must have said. Yeah.
I think someone said zoom around, maybe.
Oh yeah, definitely. We can make this smaller, but I shouldn't do it this way.
So Lola, you'll show us like how you're just embedding something, because it like all those controls and everything, did you have to build that? Are you going to show us that, or is that part of daily?
Yeah, so the integrations had to put the actions into Bildr. So yeah, next part is kind of like showing some of those things.
All right.
But yeah, great question on zooming around. So here we are, we're in Bildr Studio. Main page for this particular application, which was like the focus rooms. And then for accessing the call within Bildr, just had a simple room, and we'll talk through like the page load actions in Bildr and everything. Cool. So kind of get started with using these actions. When you add an action or go to your add actions, you'll see daily, all sorts of things. For this demo, I only had to use creating a room and joining a room, but also included are things like creating a meeting token, which is really helpful if you want to like restrict access to the video rooms that folks join. Things like, and you also have stuff like starting and stopping live streams, which is like another feature that you can add and do in your Bildr applications. Anybody have any questions? I think I heard an unmute.
On the live stream,
Mhm.
what can you live stream to? What's the
Yeah, so you'll just need, I think it's called like an encoder. Sometimes when I use it, I use like YouTube, but you can set it up in Builder. You can like even add the action for fun sakes. Set it up in Builder. You'll just need to like create a room through with a different action, have a meeting token, and then you can use, you can add like a RMT MP URL. And when you do that, you'll be able to start live streams and sort of broadcast it elsewhere.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, so another sort of feature of a couple of different actions that you can use and do things with.
You guys thought of everything. That is a hefty action list. I love it.
Yeah, so a couple of things here. So we can go like more deeply into the create a room actions that were specifically used for this virtual focus, just so you can kind of get an idea of how you would use daily in your workflows with this integration in Builder. So we can look actually specifically at the daily create a room. All of the actions are going to come for the most part with defaults that you can choose to change or use as is. Things that you can configure in daily when you're creating that like video room are like whether to enable knocking, which is for kind of like private rooms, it turns on a lobby experience. Things like screen share and chat, whether you want to have a broadcast. So you can also use this for webinars. If you want like a meeting owner or a main participant to be able to share their audio and video, and for everyone else not to have that functionality, you could use that for here too. Daily supports a ton of different languages. So if you wanted to use something other than English for the UI of Prebuilt, you can do that as well. And the things that we specifically configured for this virtual focus app is like when these rooms were accessible. So not before means when you have that parameter, people will not be able to enter into like their focus room or the room before that time. And expires, really helpful. They won't be able to enter into that room after the time. And so on your like, those rooms will like automatically expire and delete themselves. Other thing to mention is the main thing you'll need to be able to use these and make them functional is a daily API key and a daily account, which you can sign up for at daily.co. You'll put it into your project secrets in Builder. And once you do, and you set that up in your actions, you'll be able to get going with all the Builder actions. So I know that was a lot of information there. Any questions on sort of like what's included in the integration, how you might go about like setting things up or things like that?
I don't exactly have a question, but I did want to mention these actions are going to be in your studio. And I was supposed to have them in by this Builder hour and didn't. I kind of waited till the last minute and then forgot to get access to the project and all that. So probably today, or if not by Monday, these will be available for everyone. Just wanted to mention that as we're talking.
Yeah, I think until then you can like import it as a pattern, but yeah, sounds like very soon you'll just be able to access these actions within your studio. So
Lola, I'd be really curious. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt?
You're totally fine.
I would love to know how you approached building these. Can you walk us through like how you actually made these actions? I think a lot of people would be really curious and probably be inspired to make some of their own actions for other services that they find really useful that they could bring into their projects.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. So for that, we're going to go to action types. Happy to walk through specifically, how these actions were made. So they're a mix of action types, some linked to functions, but we can start with like the create room action as like an example. So if you haven't kind of experienced creating action types in Builder, you go to action type, you can create a new action type. And then you have all sorts of arguments. So, and all of these arguments actually come from Daily's API and parameters. So if you're ever curious about like what something specifically does, you can always go to daily.co, check out their documentation. I think we're also working on some Builder specific documentation to be helpful there. But all of these arguments, and then something that's kind of really handy for actions that Builder has is this HTTP call function, which enables you to like make API calls. For me specifically, for some of these actions, I did some formatting on the parameters to make sure that through this like daily content format action, to make sure that it didn't pass like nulls when they weren't necessary. And then like the final piece for these functions is being able to set a page variable. So you'll be able to capture the full response that you get from hitting the API, and can put like parts of that response stored in your database, put it in different other variables, put it in a text element, things like that.
And how did you decide when, like how many actions you would need to create? Did you kind of like say, oh, in daily, these are the different things that you can do. How can I call that to be done by Builder?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I guess I didn't share some additional context, but kind of been exploring with like the daily API and using it for different use cases. So included kind of like the actions that would cover creating a room, joining a room, live streaming based on their like documentation. Mm-hmm. There are some things that daily does that additional like things you could do with daily that aren't actions in Builder, but these were like the main and common use cases of deleting a room, joining rooms. I hope that answers your question. But
no, it does. Go ahead,
That's
y'all.
perfect. Yeah, I have one thing. So I've been doing a lot of this too, where I like go find an API. Specifically, I'm working with the OpenSea API right now for NFTs, and with every API you come into it, you got to go read all the documentation, look at how it all works, and then you can use our standard like API action to work with any of these APIs. But for someone who's new, it's really difficult to figure it out because you have to go like really understand how APIs work and go read them. And sometimes the documentation is wrong. Sometimes there are things that just don't work as it says it's going to work. So it's really fantastic. This is like the reason we structured Builder the way we did, was specifically so that someone like Lola can come in and go understand it. And then now, rather than that knowledge being just like siloed in Lola forever, it's easily distributed to everyone else who wants to use daily within Builder. So really any other type of API actions, or really any action at all, that's the goal, is that we make it as seamless and easy as possible for an expert like Lola to distribute that knowledge out to everyone else, so they don't have to go through that process every single time. So commend you, Lola, on doing that. I know how much work it is to go through a ton of endpoints, get all the pieces together, make sure it's all coherent. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was trying to get more to the complexity of it because Lola, you make it look so easy and just very, very powerful.
Oh, but I feel like daily also makes it super easy. So yeah, like clear documentation. So in terms of importing different actions and things like that and setting them up. There are also a couple of different things added in here that I guess, help it translate to Builder. So things like setting the page variable, that isn't really like a daily action, but I think Builder, you guys also do a great job of having good templates and things that you can reference to figure those pieces out. So
yeah, and I think Mark will probably chat about some of the things we're planning to make it easier to share these things that y'all end up creating. So right now it sounds like Drew's going to add these into the base toolkit. And then Lola also has a pattern. And if you import that pattern into your project, it automatically brings anything that's in that pattern, like any custom actions, any custom styling, any pages, styles, all of that.
Yeah, currently in the pattern, in addition to having these actions, there's also some pre-made flows. So if you
cool.
want to do like creating a meeting token and setting up a private room, you can just choose that flow and things like that. But I know you guys will all have like the raw actions if you want to play with it in any different kind of configuration.
Mm-hmm.
One question, Lola. Last year, I had to do a demo of Bildr before we released it to anyone, and it was height of early COVID, so everyone was in trying to figure out what you built here, So I went and found Daily, just happened to find it. I think it was on Twitter, if I remember right. And I just went and grabbed it. Was like, okay, let me see if I can do this. And I did a 10-minute demo of just integrate with Daily, build a room. And I think you're doing it very similar to what I did. So basically you create a data record, right, in a Bildr collection. And that is the room record. And you store the link inside of there.
Oh yeah, you are, yeah, totally correct. So like Daily, create a room, you'll receive, in these actions, you can set kind of like where you want to put your variable or your response from Daily. And then when I create a record, then you're able to take fields from there and put them into your database. So yeah, I have the database at this point, but even in some other kind of like versions, you can also take the link and just join the room directly if you don't necessarily want to store something, you just want like a quick video chat. But yeah.
That's really cool. And then I'm assuming in the URL route, you set up the route to use to map it to the data collection for the unique ID. Is that
Yeah. Yeah. Another great question. Also, yeah, kind of like specific to Bildr, but have this like setting a link flow. For those who are curious, you can set a link. And are like the room to access these calls. In this example, it's a dynamic page. And so I have it when I create a room, it creates it like stores like the new record when I create a new record in this new record variable. And I can use that as like the ID to get a unique link for the video call. So every time I create a room, I'm generating a new link.
Yeah, that's super cool. So then when that link you had, it was like, I don't remember what it was, but it was, preview link, whatever, for Bildr / room or something. And then this unique ID, right?
Mm-hmm. You totally got it. Yeah.
Cool.
So that's, how you would set it up. I guess a couple other like short things to note with creating a room and or like this particular example, also converted these date timestamps to like Unix because that will be required for the not before and expires parameters, but they also all have like tooltips. So if you use an action, you kind of forget what's needed, you can kind of get it straight from the action. So
that is very cool. Can you show us how you did that, Lola?
Yeah. Can everybody, do I need to zoom in or is this
I think we can. I think you're good. Yeah.
I can do even zoom in.
It won't zoom in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. So yeah, so another Bildr thing, this is like a concatenate. And so we've got, this is the begin input and the time. And then I store it in this like NBF variable. And same thing with like the end time. And then when you go into your create room, you can use those variables in this example. I can probably even include this example in the pattern as well. I think right now it's just like a demo page with demo workflows and stuff. But yeah, if anybody wants to see that setup if they're using it.
So it looks like the whole generate link flow that Lola has here walks through about 6 different actions. So first you're taking the time, you're converting that for both the start time and the end time. And then you're using the daily action to create the room, which is then creating the record and then setting the profile link. And that's what you were walking through, Mark. So from top to bottom, all of that's is the flow that she has to do all of that. Okay, that you can do that at only 5 steps is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and some of the extra steps are because of like the sort of transforming the like not before time and like the after time. But if you just wanted to like create a room and have it expire at like some arbitrary time or sort of modify it differently, you might only just need this step. So yeah, definitely depends.
And so after you create the room and you're in the room, Lola, you had another page on there. What's on that page? Could you walk us through what you built there?
Yeah, definitely. So there's like 2 pages here. So we've got this kind of like our home page where we're creating the room. And then this is it's a blank page for accessing the room. The only thing that you need on this is we have like with these pages by default, there's the page load action. And on page load, I have it joining the room. And here, like the parameters, you have the URL. You also have some options to like customize what the room, where the room appears. So
cool.
For this integration, yeah, there's full screen. You can do top right, bottom right. And there's also an audio only option if you didn't want to do like a video room at all and just have like a call. And this is also where you would put in things like meeting tokens, which I think we talked just like briefly about. But if you wanted to make this a private room, you can share from your database the meeting token for maybe an authenticated user so they could access the room, whereas everybody else might need to be let in by like a meeting owner.
It does seem like it's already pretty private by default because it doesn't generate the link for the room until like you go in there and you have to manually share it, right, in order for people to access it.
Oh yeah, so
so it seems like
the case of the virtual, they would have to really guess some random string
what that URL is, but it's cool that you can add some additional authentication there. Maybe like if you were building like a medical app or telehealth, this would be a good option for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
okay. Or even like networking apps. And the meeting token is not even just for like privacy. Like if you wanted to do something like a webinar, like to identify like the owner, the person who gets to share their screen, you could use a meeting token for when they join the room.
You assign a token to a role kind of, right? Like the token is a role. And so that way you could share that with your team. And there's 3 people who have that token, and anyone with that token gets certain permissions inside the meeting, and everyone else is maybe just view only or something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, you can do things like that. Even as like a meeting owner too, like if you have that permission, you'll have the ability to like mute other people or turn off folks' audio or video if you wanted to kind of have like a moderator. You could do things like that. So yeah, there's different options.
Okay. Fantastic. Does anyone else have any additional questions? Okay. All right. Looks like we have some additional information on that in the chat. At the step where EXP and NBF are set, you can set enable screen share. That will, okay, he's answering Tom's question, whether you can screen share from the local participant. Okay, fantastic. This is so cool.
Yeah.
This is so cool. So essentially Daily has pre-built like this video sharing page, right? In the controls. And then what you're doing is you're just creating that connection to link out to that, right? Am I understanding that right, Mark? Did I? Because I just want to be clear for the people who are like really excited to use this that may not know, like you don't have to go configure all of those, the pages for the screen share and the actions that stop it. And you can see participants and all of that, change the viewing from gallery to speaker. Like y'all don't have to build any of that. Daily has done all of that work for you. And then Lola has done all the work for you to bring that in. So you can just, right?
Yeah, you're totally correct. Yeah. You don't have to create like any like custom like video elements or like, yeah, like figure out like where should people video be when they join the room and things like that. Daily Pre-Vault has handled all of that. So definitely shout outs to Daily.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. Well, fantastic. If anyone has any questions for the Daily team on how their service works or anything like that, it sounds like they are super active on the chat. So please feel free to reach out to them and then check out Daily. And then Lola, do you have a link for your pattern to share, or would you like to share that at a later date?
Drop the pattern link in the chat. I can stop sharing now. Yeah, I can drop the pattern link in the chat. And yeah, if you guys have any like questions, especially about like the pattern, definitely feel free to like message me on Twitter, or you can @ me, you can email me. I don't know if you guys have my email or anything, but definitely happy to help out and would love to know what you guys build and create with Bildr and Daily.
All right. Thank you so much, Lola. That was fantastic. And then as Drew is chatting, I am going to share with y'all Lola's Twitter. And then in the notes, when we post this recording to the community, we'll include all of her and Daily's information as well. So thank you, Daily, so much for creating such a fantastic product and making it super easy. Lola, thank you for finding a way to use Bildr and give the ability for everyone to connect with Daily. Like, fantastic work. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that was super cool, and I'm really excited about that. So now we're going to talk about something that might not be as cool, but equally as helpful, and that is revision control. So Drew, I think, is going to take us through the general discussion of that. And revision control is essentially how you manage updating in your project. So he's going to take us through some of the best practices. As a little bit of background, most of the features that we've built for publishing and revision control in Bildr have come out of our years of running an agency and having to do enterprise level products that we continue to update over time, and making a lot of mistakes in the early days and figuring out what we needed and what worked and what didn't work. So Drew's going to take us through everything in how it currently works in Bildr, and then Mark will chat a little bit about what the future plans are for that. So y'all feel free to hang out, or if you need to kick off, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, Drew, take it away.
Cool. So I'm just going to do sort of a high level overview of all these different publishing and revision stuff that's in Bildr, but it would be helpful if you do have a question, feel free to ask so I can go off on a little tangent. But, you know, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds. I feel like we got a few questions about this over the last week or 2 weeks, and it makes sense to just lay it out. So you're just looking at a current project I'm working on that has a couple things set with like a subdomain and a custom domain. So what I did was, if you're working on your project, if you're in Bildr, you probably already know this, but if you're working on your project, you click preview, you get this live preview with a URL. And So I can just open that up. And that URL is a really crazy string.builder.com. And that URL live updates as you build in your studio. So what you're actually looking at, if you didn't realize, is your development deployment. So you can think of a deployment as like a copy of your app like at a certain state, or like we call them slots, we call them deployments. But basically what I'm working on in the studio is changing, and then it's updating live on this preview URL. But as soon as I publish this project and I have users on it, I actually don't want it to update live, obviously. I can't make changes and have it update for my users. So what I do in order to handle that is I publish. And when you publish, you get these options. You're basically doing a from and a to when you publish. So the first thing it's going to ask you is choose a source to publish from. And so 99.99% of the time, you're going to choose development, the one you're working in, and then you're going to publish it either to production or test. And when you publish to production or test, you get a different URL. That's your preview URL. And now that's what you would give to people. So if you had a client that you need to look at, if you had your partners you wanted to show them, you can use a test deployment, give them a test URL. If you have real end users using your app, that's probably your production URL. And so now when I make changes in my development deployment, it's not going to change my production URL. My production URL is whatever's in that production slot. And so before I go through that quickly, there is on the left on this cloud with an arrow up, there's a little deployments kind of like menu. And in here, you can see by default, every Builder project is going to have your development that you're working in, a production and a test deployment. And right now, because I've already published this project, it's got URLs attached to these. When you first start, these are just blank. There's actually nothing in them. And you're just working in your development until you publish. But also the reason I show this is because you can create as many deployments as you want. So you can come in here and you can add deployments for anything. So an example might be if you want to back up your whole site at a certain, like take a snapshot of it at a certain period in time, you can create like that backup deployment. You can publish from development into backup. And then now that's sitting there and you can keep working in development, making changes. If you want to revert, you'd actually be able to go into that new deployment. You'd be able to publish from that back into development. Or you could publish if you find there's an error in production, if you move forward, you could actually publish from the backup into production, things like that. So you can get a little advanced, but for now, I feel like it makes sense to just focus on development, production, and test.
Yeah.
And so what I do on any app is first, so I get it how I want. I'm using the live view. I get it to the point where I'm ready for someone to see it. The first thing I usually do is I publish from development into test. And when you do that, well, it skipped it because I already have the subdomain set up, but it's going to ask you if you want to set up a subdomain or a custom domain. For those, you just kind of follow the instructions. And if you're doing a custom domain, you're going to have to set up your own DNS settings. It tells you everything, kind of like walks you through the steps. It's relatively easy, but DNS is confusing sometimes. For a Bildr subdomain, you just type in what you want. So for this one, it's dead, like ded.builder.com. I just type DED, Bildr checks that it's unique, and I can hit publish.
I have one open. Do you want me to show the process real quick?
Yeah, sure.
I can
That would
show
be
it.
great.
Yeah. Let me, let's see. So in here, I have actually tested, this is not good practice. Drew's doing it right, but I already published directly to production and I didn't go through a test environment, but it's just like one page site that I'm just using. So if you go, the first time you go into a deployment to publish to it, you're going to get these options for subdomain or custom domain. So if you do subdomain, it's really simple. You just type in, whatever it is, and it's not going to let you do like special characters. Like it's not going to allow that, or spaces. It's going to take that out. And so you type in what you want, and then you're going to verify whether or not that's available. So if it's not available, it won't let you publish to it because these are subdomains on Bildr. And then when you're ready, you click continue, and it'll actually create that subdomain and publish to it. On the custom domain side, you would need to enter any additional domains and subdomains that you want to tie to this deployment. And when you do that, you'll get, well, I don't actually, let's show me an example. So you can kind of see, you'll put in like your domain any subdomains and add any other ones that you want. And then from there, you'll have all the DNS settings. Like Drew said, that does get a little complicated. It's different for each DNS provider. So yeah, so that's kind of the process. Most test environments just use a subdomain, and that's going to be plenty good. And then you don't have to have a custom domain for it. And then you have full control on the custom domain side and unlimited custom domains on any published project. Also, all of them have HTTPS built in. Everything is HTTPS in Bildr. So yep, there you go. Switch back over to you, Drew.
Cool. And I don't even think I have like too much more to add to that. I was going to mention what he said, which is basically for a project like Bildr, you know, we're building the actual Bildr studio in Bildr. Like we definitely have a test environment and a test process, and we published a test. It goes through testing with like a QA team. We go back to production and fix things. We publish a test again. That's like a very professional process. And then when it's ready, you can publish straight from test to production. So even if you made changes in development, you know your test version's solid, you publish that out. But for like 95% of my projects, I'm going straight from development to production, because if I make a mistake with the like handful of users I have on some side project, no big deal. I just change it and republish it in production. So you don't actually have to use that test setup, but it's really great for big projects, like I mentioned, and client work. So if you need to show your client changes before anything's live, and you still want to be working in the dev, you don't want them to see your like live changes. You just want to see a solid, you know, snapshot of the app. That's a good use for test as well. And I mean, I think that pretty much covers it. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was awesome. As a project manager, reading y'all's little comments and hearing you say that gives me so much anxiety. Because oh man, with our agency, if we ever make any sort of change in production, it is like a huge thing, usually because I have to take the calls after hours and it's not that fun. So as far as best practices goes, everything that you do in your development environment, you want to test before you push anywhere, right? So use the live preview to at least test through it if you are going to push straight to production. And then everything is built in, though, if you do want to go through the test process. So do your work, publish it to test, test through it there. And then if you're solid, push it to production. Okay. Now, you can have even more complicated staging than that. For example, for one of our agencies' projects, it's massive. And so we actually have a pre-production environment. So they have it's like a retail system thing. They have a certain subset of stores that actually run on pre-production so they can catch any issues. Because here's the thing is when you're building something massive, and you guys know this because you catch issues in Bildr all the time, you catch little bugs all the time. You cannot test through every single use case, every single way that a user is actually going to be using your app. So that's why it's super important to have staging when you are building something at scale. And so in that kind of same vein, I want to revisit when Drew talked about being able to create deployments for anything that you're needing to create snapshots at a given time. So what are y'all's recommendations for projects of scale, when to create those snapshots? I would think one is like before you're about to, so say you've got something running in production and you're going to go add this big new feature or something that is currently touching a lot of different areas in your project. Before you start that work, you'd want to create a deployment and publish to that, right? To kind of capture that state before you go making all these changes that break stuff. Could y'all talk to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I can go through some of that. And it actually kind of answers Fraser's question in the chat as well. So we definitely want to add a whole bunch of new mechanisms into this deployment slot process and the publishing process, but it does handle pretty much every case already, depending on what you're trying to do. So for instance, in Fraser's question, he's got this So you're building something out, right? You're creating this project, you deploy it, you've got users in production. They're in there working on things that your users are finding bugs. In the meantime, you're in your development environment making major changes. Maybe you're doing an overhaul to a part of the system or something. So you've got this problem where you now need to fix a couple of really fast bugs, right, that are issues in the project that's in production, but you've made so many changes in your development version that you're like weeks or months or something away from actually having that ready to publish to production, right? So there's a natural problem. It's a problem in all software development. In code, that's handled with, forking and branching and all that good stuff and merging and all that. And that will eventually come for Bildr. We're going to have a very similar setup long term. Oh, thank you, Peter. I don't know. Is that better? Maybe I'll talk into the mic. But what you can do right now, you can already do some of this because you can take the, say you take your current production environment, create a new deployment slot, publish from development into that deployment slot. So now I've got this like snapshot of current development sitting there, and then take production, publish that back into development. Now you can make changes in the studio to what is currently production, fix the bugs, publish then from development to test it, and then publish that to production. Then when you're done, now take that slot that you had created, that deployment slot you created just for this one time, you took development and published it there, publish from there back into development, and you're sort of back to square one with where you started. So that kind of gets you through that loop where you need to fix this today, get that published out into production as fast as possible, especially if it's like a crashing bug where you need to fix this right now. So that's the process that I would go through for that. Does that make sense, Fraser? Hopefully that answers that question. I think it kind of goes through some of what you were talking about too, Cora.
Yeah.
And one small thing with that, because you took that snapshot and rolled it back into dev, because there is no merge process from that one-time fix, you still need to replicate that fix in the development so you don't lose it.
Good call, Dorian.
Good call.
Yeah, so you would be making that bug fix twice.
But that almost never happens. That's like an emergency situation usually, especially if you're going through test first.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and while I'm talking here, I did forget one thing that's cool to note. If you are in a slot, so we're talking about publishing to a new slot and then publishing back, you can actually go in, like I went into, I think this was test or this production I just clicked. There's a revision drop down here where you can actually find snapshots from the past and revert to a different revision there. It's a little more of like an advanced topic. And I don't know if Mark's going to talk about that when he talks about the future of stuff, but there are some options there. I've never used that in my whole life, but you could use that if you needed to revert or roll back to a previous version and you didn't have a snapshot.
Yeah. I think that's super helpful. It's not where it needs to be for it to actually be easy to use and not prone to user error, mostly because it's just date time based. And I think Mark will talk a little bit more about the way that we see it. So what we currently do for Bildr, which is massive, is we have we actually use the Cycles app that Mark built in Bildr to manage like all of the bugs, all of the feature requests, all of the changes that we're making. When you do something that's like a big scope, I think like Drew, he's the only one who's working in dead.so. He knows exactly what he's changing, so he can easily push to production. If you are building something that's enterprise level or something that has a lot of users, you'll probably want some way to actually manage and know what are the things that are actually going in your release, right? So what are all the changes that you've made? What are all the things that you need to test? Some people maybe find it helpful to use like a notepad, right? Where you're tracking like, okay, I fixed this bug, I made this change, etc. And then you know what you're going to be testing through, or maybe you have like a smoke test that you run in your app specifically. But we use like the Cycles app to manage, like, because in a release, we can have hundreds of changes that have been made, and we have to go test everything related to those changes. So there is a bit of that you'll need to do outside of Bildr itself. And then I think, Mark, if you want to talk about how we will make some of those things a little bit easier as far as like the revision and the snapshots, probably would be good to add like a notes field on the deployments and on the revision. So if you needed to make a note on what specifically that backup was, right now, if you create a deployment, you have to name it something. So for right now, if you were creating some sort of backup before you went and you started this, I would recommend creating a deployment name, giving it the date that you're publishing to it, and then saying, you know, production version before, you know, production version before starting X feature or something like that, you know, so you can kind of easily identify what the different deployment backup deployments are, things
And
like that.
I do have that in Cycles and in Founder Update and a couple other side projects that I built because I decided I want to make like big architectural changes to the project, but I already have it in production with users. And so I just make a backup of that exact thing. And then I start on my big architectural changes. And a couple of times I would actually just let those changes go. Just like I would make another deployment, put those in there, and then go back to where I started from in the first place, because I was like, oh, actually, that was a bad idea. So I'm just going to throw that out now and not do that. But usually that's only for the large architectural change stuff where you're like going to the core of the app and saying, you know what, I built this wrong, or I want to add these major feature enhancements or something like that. Well, we've got a few minutes left. I just want to talk real quickly about the sort of the future of what we see the proper way to handle this long term. And just to catch everyone up in the room too, so, there's a lot of new people in here today. Bildr, you know, spun out of our studio, and Bildr is really version 6 of our internal tools that we've been using for years to build for clients. And actually this version of Bildr doesn't even have all of the features yet. It's still missing things that we already have in our other production environment that we use for clients and on the agency side. It's two totally separate companies. Some of the resources are split, but we basically are leveling up that whole thing, brought it out as a product to market. And so some of those things revolve around these releases. So one of the big things that we really want to get is merging. Bildr is effectively generating a ton of JSON files. It's a bunch of static files that are then used at execution at runtime to deliver the application, whatever it is. And so it's just a bunch of JSON. It can definitely have a proper merging process. So you can just know exactly what's going on and merge it how you want to. The other thing is snapshots. So the way that Bildr operates when you do a publish, it actually takes a copy of all of that JSON, all the different entities that store the JSON, recreates all of them into its own separate data container, and then regenerates all of the static files from there. And then that gets applied to the deployment slot. And so because of that, it's like hot swapping. There's no downtime or anything when you're publishing, but it also is just like an inherently snapshot-esque kind of way to do it, right? It's just designed with that in mind. So we need to build a nice UI around snapshots so that you're not having to go through all this deployment mechanism to create the snapshot. That's sort of like a workaround right now. The other big thing that we really want to do that we could use is page or workspace-based publishing. So let's say you've got your website in one workspace and your app in the other workspace. You don't want to have to wait for all the app changes that you're working on to be able to publish the website out today, even because they're in the same project. So that's coming as well. And then visual release log, it kind of goes into what Cora was saying there with like typing in notes, but really because we already know what changed from the previous release, we can actually just show you, here are the 5 pages that got updated, and you can drill in, here are the actions that were modified, and go in and basically generate those release notes for you automatically. And then you can just put context around the release of saying, you know, this page is modified and here's my text about that, just making that process easier. Last thing in regard to tasks, like I would we don't have any plans to put task management like inside of Builder. I think it's something that should be kept external. However, using APIs to interact back and forth with task management, that's the direction we want to go in, so that as those changes come out, we're automatically updating things for you within whatever task system you're using. So I think that's probably it. I'm sure there's a ton more if we really sat here and talked about it, because there always is, but I think that's probably good enough for now. And thank you everyone for coming today. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. And big thank you to Lola and to the Daily team for bringing another awesome opportunity to the Bildr users. We're so grateful for y'all. Everyone have a wonderful weekend.